Uh, Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of our president and my committee colleagues, I welcome you to this session of the Kolkata Literary Meet. May I now hand over the proceedings to Mr. Pradeep Guptu to take the program forward.
Good morning, dear guests, and particularly visitors connected to the Kolkata Literary Meet. On behalf of the club and particularly its library subcommittee, we extend a very warm, and that's a deliberate use of the word, a warm welcome this morning. We are trying to arrange a few chairs in the shade so that you don't suffer too much from the rising temperature as the day progresses. I'm here only to tell you about the fact that the Calcutta Club possibly possesses one of the best club libraries in India. We have 40,000 odd titles. We are constantly churning our stock. We get rid of books that are not being read and buy books on a monthly basis. And we have a vast community of membership interested in reading, in literature, in literary talks, as this crowd before you will prove. It's also a great honor to welcome our speakers, and may I now request the chairperson of our library subcommittee, Ms. Kasturi Raha, to step forward and welcome our two speakers for the morning session, the 11:15 session with a flower bouquet. First, may I request Chitra to please step forward and receive a flower bouquet. Chitra, would you, on the stage? Yes, I think so. I'm the moderator for this session. Jash Sen, are you here? Yes. May I request you to please make the effort and climb up the two steps? I'll move the third. I know. I'll just move it. May I now request Malavika to speak about the literary meet while we move the extra chair from the stage. Malavika.
Thank you, Pradeepda. Good morning, everybody. It's always wonderful for the Tata Steel Kolkata Literary Meet to come to the Calcutta Club. We've been doing this for the last 4 editions, and this is very special because an event that is partnered by a library always sounds right, because libraries are where we find the books, and I hope the literary festival is where you find the writers. So I won't take your time, and I'm handing over proceedings to Josh, who will be in conversation with Chitra Di.
Are we sharing a mic?
Happy to share.
Thank you so much, Mala. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my inestimable pleasure to welcome you to the Calcutta Club lawns for this interview with Chitra. Chitra needs no introduction. We are here today to talk about her 16th book, which has just been released in 2016, and it's called Before We Visit the Goddess. Couple of hygiene factors. The book is available right there behind you for signings, and after the formal unveiling, I'm sure Chitra will grace us with a few minutes. So if you would like to get your copy and get it signed, please feel free to do so after the session. So I thought when we begin this conversation, the way we'd structure it is about 35 to 40 odd minutes of us talking. I don't want to talk too much myself, so ideally I hope you have a lot of questions to ask her. Please do formulate them in your mind, and we will move on to the questions directly afterwards. Yeah. So we were talking last night, and I did want to ask you then, why this particular narrative of 3 generations? We've had so many multi-generational stories of Indian men, Indian women, families. Why the story of Sabitri from this poor village, her brush with privilege, and the subsequent generations? What made you write it?
Well, the idea for this story came to me soon after my own mother passed away, which was about 6 years back now. And I had been thinking at that time, my mother was very important in my life and in my upbringing. For many years, she was pretty much a single parent. She brought me and my younger brothers up really on her own with a great deal of difficulty. So after she passed away, I was thinking a lot about her influence on my life, her influence and the heritage that she passed on. And from that, since I now have two boys of my own, I was thinking about what I am passing on. So I wanted to write a three-generational story. It seemed like the right time for me. This is really my first major three-generational book where all three generations have equal space on the page. And I began to think about how heritage is really a complicated thing. We often use that word and we think of it positively, but heritage can be negative as well, because sometimes, even without meaning to, we convey our prejudices and our fears of the world to the next generation. So these were some of the thoughts in my mind. Also, when I was growing up, my mother always used to say to me, I want you to be a successful woman. I don't want you to have the kinds of challenges that I'm facing today. And as I was writing this book, I was thinking about, what does that mean? What did it mean to my mother a generation ago? And what does it mean now to me living in America? And is it something that changes with generations and also with time, but also with place? Some things change. Do some things remain the same? So all of these thoughts were in my mind and really pushed me into this three-generational structure. But I didn't want it to be a conventional three-generational novel, like with 1,000 pages. I wanted something different for this book.
So you must excuse me because I read this book over yesterday and early this morning, and it's buzzing in my head. And part of the challenge that I'm facing today is to not give away too much because I don't want to. But it's a very, very gripping book, and it kind of pulls you in from the word go. And my impression, Chitra, was that it's a book that talks about love, the loss of love, but there's this entire undercurrent through this book of choices and the way every generation views the other generation's choices. In fact, every character, the way every character views, the question of choices and how choices may not be wrong as we initially think through the book, but maybe just different. And I was wondering if that was playing through your mind as well, because it kind of comes through on the page.
Thank you. Yes, choices are very important, and the theme of choices for women and the importance of women making their choices, even if they tend to sometimes make the choice that's not the wisest one, the importance of them being able to choose has long been a theme for my work. And I really believe in that, that without choice, a whole aspect of our humanity is taken away from us. So I really believe in the importance of everyone, but particularly women, because they're often in a more endangered situation, as it were, of making choices. But yes, these characters are a complex mix of positives and negatives, and there are three main characters. Shabitri is the grandmother. Her daughter is Bela. Shabitri lives all her life in Kolkata and the surrounding, and a village, Bengali village. Her daughter Bela will go under strange circumstances to the United States, and her daughter Tara will spend her whole life in the United States, but will have strange, longings for her home country and her grandmother, whom she never meets. So they will all make important choices, and one of the choices that they will make is they all want to go to college, but their path to education will be very thorny and not necessarily complete, or not necessarily a smooth one from start to finish. And yet they both all understand the importance of that.
So the other bit that I loved was and I was saying this earlier on, is that we typically, in novels, we identify and we invest ourselves emotionally with the larger characters, the bigger people in the story. But here I found myself drawn to and emotionally connected and invested in a host of minor characters. And I absolutely loved Mrs. Sonu Mehta. I mean, she's one of my favorites. So who were your favorite characters? I mean, before we launch into the reading, just anyone in mind?
Well, I'm glad you said that, because especially with this novel, the minor characters were very important to me. Now, the main characters are the three women I talked about, and it's long been my project, and I think will continue to be my project, to place women at the centers of my books, novels or stories. And this is because I really believe in that. I believe that it's very important to have women telling their own stories in their own voices. And for centuries, we have not had that. And so I feel I want to do that. However, that said, the minor characters in this book, perhaps more than any other book, except perhaps for Palace of Illusions, the minor characters are very important. And several of the minor characters are men who are very significant in the lives of these women, not necessarily their husbands, but sometimes strangers who come into their lives and help them transform it. So I too became very fond of the minor characters. And my favorite minor character actually is a non-Indian character. His name is Ken. He is a young gay man whom Bela will meet late in her life when she is in a very difficult situation for many complex reasons. She is living alone and she has become an alcoholic. And her relationship with Ken, their friendship, is going to transform her life. So yeah, the minor characters were very important to me.
May I ask you to read a little bit out of the book?
Sure. For this audience, I wanted to read something from the life of Sabitri, the grandmother. And this part is set in Kolkata. No, it has nothing to do with the ages of people. I see people laughing. But it is because Sabitri, the grandmother, at this time, she's a very young woman. So there you go. And she has just moved from her village to the city of Kolkata, where she is going to college. Now, the whole situation comes about because, in a strange way, because Savitri's family is very poor. She doesn't have money to go to college. But a rich woman from the village who has a home in Kolkata kind of grudgingly says, okay, if she gets into college, she can stay in our Kolkata home and she can go to college. So she gets into one of the women's colleges. The person she's staying with, Leela Moi, is not particularly nice to her, but Savitri understands that this is an opportunity. She's studying very hard. She goes to the women's college for her most of her classes, but her science and math classes are in the men's college, which is how it was at that time. And something unexpected happens to Savitri at this point, which is she meets Leela Moi's son, the young heir of the household, and they fall in love. This is all very secret because they understand that the family won't really take to her with open arms. So they meet on the terrace, and the young man brings up, his name is Rajiv, and he brings up a red quilt for them to sit on as they chat and as they spend long hours telling each other their dreams about their future. So, and this section takes place soon after that. Summer had descended upon Kolkata with epic vengeance. Savitri came back from college bedraggled with sweat, craving a bath, cold water cascading over her body in the maid's bathroom. But a servant was waiting. Leela Moi wanted to see her. Savitri was surprised. "Let me drink some water," she said. "Change my shari." The woman scrunched up her face and shook her head. "Ranima's waiting. Better come right now." The first thing Savitri saw when she entered the room was the red quilt from the terrace, crumpled on the floor like the pelt of a dead animal. The blood rushed to her head and then away. She had to hold on to the doorframe. When her vision cleared, she looked around for Rajiv, who would surely defend her. But there was only Lilamoi, and behind her, Paro, her special maid servant, hands on her hips, swollen with satisfaction. And so there's a big showdown. Lilamoi curses her and finally throws her out of the house. So this is now night time, and I'll read the next part. Shabitri stood at the tram stop for a long while in the oppressive dusk, carrying her small painted trunk. Finally, she boarded a tram that would take her to the men's college. She could think of no other place. She opened her handbag, so light, and looked down at the frighteningly few rupee notes in there. Her trunk was light too. Paro had followed her to her room and rummaged through it and taken whatever she had wanted. Shabitri had been too heartsick to protest. The men's college loomed eerily in the gloom. Shabitri slipped through the gate, thankful that the gateman wasn't there to stop her, and ran up the stairs. On the second story, at the end of a corridor, there was a small room with a plaque on it, Women's Common Room. She had gone there once exploring with her friends. It was piled with dusty furniture and smelled of mice droppings. But there was a bolt on the inside and a small toilet. She could stay there for the night. Tomorrow, she couldn't handle the thought of tomorrow yet. When she reached it, the door to the common room was padlocked. The strength went out of her, and she slid to the floor, unable to hold in her sobs any longer. Terror and rage, but foremost was the fear of what might happen to her tonight when the night watchman came by. Would he throw her out on the street? Would he do worse? Beneath it all roiled the humiliation. What would her parents, her relatives, her village say if they knew she had been kicked out of Lilamoi's home like a dog? No one would care that the love she and Rajiv had felt for each other was pure and beautiful. She had been weeping too hard to hear the footsteps. When she felt a hand on her shoulder, she flinched and cried out, throwing up her arms to protect herself. And I will end at this moment wickedly, so you won't know who it is.
So, a word to the wise. Please do not read this book if you're on a diet, because it's replete with sweets and you will go off it. I mean,
Bengali sweets.
Yeah, absolutely,
Bengali sweets
absolutely.
are very
delicious,
important in this
delicious.
book.
Which brings me to a slightly thorny issue. And so,
Can I just say something about the sweets?
Yes.
So Shabitri, as she goes on later in life, she will open a sweet shop. Her mother in the village was a great sweet maker. Shabitri learned a lot from it. And Shabitri will have many difficulties in her life, but finally she will open a sweet shop in Kolkata. She will call it Durga Sweets after her mother. And I wanted to place her in a sweet shop as a woman entrepreneur, because as many of you know, especially in that generation, all the major sweet makers were men, and all the major sweet shops were named after them. And so I wanted to place her in that environment and have her be really successful.
right, I was going to ask you something slightly different. This is a very, very Bengali book. The cover isn't very Bengali at all. Any thoughts, any views on that?
Yeah, I think it's, as probably many people know, and certainly just about all the writers in this audience know, that we don't exactly control our covers. So when this cover was coming out, I mean, it is an Indian cover, but the woman there is not wearing a Bengali outfit. And I had asked, and we had had many conversations for her to wear a Bengali shari, because the story begins with Shabitri in the village, and it would have been very appropriate if she had worn a Bengali shari. But I did not prevail, and therefore she's wearing something that's not Bengali. And the irony is, this is my Indian cover. The American cover is very different, and it has, it's very abstract. It has a woman's hands, it has flowers, and that's it. So.
Yeah, that is indeed ironical. So there's a thread of spirituality that kind of runs through this book, from its title to the title of the sweet shop. And in your acknowledgements, you have, I mean, it's very clear that you are very, very spiritually oriented, and it's a big strand that runs through your life. And I wanted to ask you to what extent it anchors your writing.
I think spirituality has been important for me for a long time, but of course to bring that into my writing in a way that would be appropriate and that would further the art instead of pulling it down was a very tricky thing. I think really when I wrote The Palace of Illusions, a big change occurred because I could begin to see Draupadi's journey, and indeed all of our journeys, as a spiritual journey, the journey of a soul through this world. And I think after that, this book, I definitely was thinking of it as a spiritual journey in search of self, in search of the inner divinity. So the title, Before We Visit the Goddess, there's actually a chapter that's titled that, and the very mundane or specific meaning is that Tara at this point will undertake a visit. She will drive to the temple of Goddess Meenakshi, which is a major Indian temple in Houston, where I now live and where Tara is also living at this point. So there's, that's the practical meaning of before we visit the goddess. Something will happen when she goes to this temple, very much against her will. She's kind of forced to because she works as a driver and she has to take someone to the temple, but something will happen. But beyond that, I felt that the journeys of all these three women were journeys in search of self, in search of the strength which is within, which is ultimately, I see that as a spiritual strength. So they're searching for the goddess within, as it were. But there are some things I felt that need to happen in our lives before that spiritual journey can be completed or can really be successful, which is we have to come in touch with maybe difficult things in life. Difficult things that teach us compassion, teach us forgiveness for ourselves as well as for others, and which ultimately bring us strength. And I wanted to say one more thing, which is I referred to a chapter with this title. So this book is very unlike my other books in its form. And with all of my novels, with all of my books, I try to set myself a challenge, a formal challenge. And in this one, it was 3 generations, but not a long saga. They're told in the form of short stories. So this is a novel in stories. Each story is complete, but each story is connected. And this allowed me to focus on the emotionally resonant moments in the lives of these women and not necessarily connect all the dots. And I have a great faith that the readers will be able to connect the dots between these moments.
But it didn't feel choppy at all, if you know what I mean. It was very, very smooth reading because it just completely absorbed me. Speaking of writing, you have acknowledged your writing group, your writers group in your acknowledgements, and I wanted to ask, I mean, you're so many books down, you're a veteran. Why the need for this network? Why do you think it's valuable? How does it help you?
Yes, I have a writers group that I am very thankful for, and they live all in different places of the world, so we meet on Skype about once a month or every 6 weeks, and we all share work. It's been very, very helpful to me because I feel, and I say this to my students at the University of Houston, where I teach creative writing, I tell them it's so important to have someone else look at your work. Because even when we've been writing for years, we're too close, at least I am, too close to my work when I've just written it. I mean, so it's like this, I write something, and I look at it right then, And it seems wonderful. It seems perfect, like it's come from God's brain through my computer into the world. I mean, how could this be better? Then I look at it after 3 days and it seems terrible. Nothing seems to be working. So, it's very hard to have just that objective distance. And that's why for me a writers group has been very helpful. It's also helpful because everyone in that writers group is writing very different work. And so I'm in touch with many different kinds of writing and many different ways of approaching this story, all of which is very helpful for me. And the third major thing it does is it imposes a deadline because I have to have something for my writers group when it's time for my work to be discussed. So I have to make sure.
So you have a
there.
formal structure when you say, by such and such date, so
Yes,
much will be done.
we
and we'll talk
turn in
about
our
it.
work to everyone, to the group, like a week before, so everyone can read and comment on things.
Brilliant. So, what is really delightful is that The Palace of Illusions is going to be made into a film by Aparna Sen.
Who is here in the audience with everything is in very early states, but I just had to, say how
I'm horrible
happy
and
I am,
excitable.
how
What can I
happy-
say? Terribly, terribly excited about the whole thing. We hope.
Yes, yes.
We hope.
Yes, everyone send good energy, and preferably if lots of investment money to this movie so that everything can happen fast. So yes, if you are interested in investing more in this movie, come speak to me afterwards and we will make sure it
I'm
happens.
sorry, I
But
couldn't resist.
I'm a great fan of Aparna, so I just wanted to acknowledge her. And thank you so much for coming today. And Kolanda, I wanted to acknowledge you also, fellow writer.
Could we end the session with you talking about this book a little bit? Because it's just,
Sure.
it's quite magnificent, really. I mean,
Sure. The Palace of Illusions was a very different kind of book for me to write. It is, as some of you know, it's based on the Mahabharata. It's a retelling of the Mahabharata from Draupadi's point of view. Now, I was very blessed because my Dadu was a great storyteller, and he lived in a little village about 2 hours from here. And I went and spent most of my summer vacations with him. And he would call, in the evenings, he would call all of us cousins, and we would all sit down. And at that time, the village didn't have electricity, so he'd light a kerosene lamp, and we'd sit around, and we would listen to all these stories that he told out of our folk tales, our fairy tales, and our epics. And he was the first great storyteller in my life. I think he is the one who made me love story and the idea of storytelling. So, he told me the story of the Mahabharata. I loved the story of the Mahabharata. And as I grew up, I then read it myself, first in those picture book versions and then, in more elaborate versions. And it always struck me that in this great story, there were so many great and complex women characters, but we didn't get much about what they were thinking or feeling. They were always kind of at the edge of the canvas. And I wanted to write a book where the character that fascinated me the most, Draupadi, she would be at the center and she would be telling the story as it happened to her, her understanding, her feelings, her tragedy, her triumphs, all of those would be central. And I think that's what led me to write The Palace of Illusions. It took me a long time. It was probably the most difficult of my books to write because I did a lot of research. I read various versions of the Mahabharata, which, are quite different from each other. And ultimately, I settled on two, Vyas's original Mahabharata and Kashiram Das, the Bengali Mahabharata, and then used my imagination to fill the gaps.
it's been a sheer pleasure interviewing you, Chitra.
Thank you.
I will now open the, the forum to questions. So if you have any questions for Chitra, do raise your hand so we can find you. I should. Yeah. Just-
I have only one request because I haven't read the book for Chitra to read a little more.
from Before We Visit
Before
the
We
Goddess?
Visit the Goddess,
Okay,
yes.
I'll do that. And what I'll do is I'll choose a very different voice and a very different time and place. Okay, I will read to you from a chapter titled American Life. And this is set much later. This is in 1998. And this is from the life of Tara, the granddaughter. At this point, several tragedies have happened in Tara's life, which I won't go into. But she's kind of cut herself off from her parents. She's dropped out of college. She's working part-time in a thrift store, and she's moved in with a man named Robert. She met Robert when Robert is a massage therapist, and she met him when she went for a massage. But they became friends, and now she's moved in with him. But at first things were going well, but now there are problems, and so I will read to you a little bit about the problems. So I have to make a disclaimer over here, or several disclaimers. So, Robert and she are not married, they're living together. This book has a lot of things that I see happening in the US and probably happening here in India as well. One of the questions that I was asked by a reporter, an interviewer, was, why is there so much sex in this book? And why is it between people who are not married? So the disclaimer is, and my answer to her was, well, I mean, it does happen in the world, doesn't it? But the disclaimer before, I don't want to sell this book under false pretenses, so I have to tell you now what my husband always complains about, which is that there is sex in the book, but it's in the white space between sections. So, and this is important, as you will see in this segment. The reason for my fight with Robert is a stuffed raccoon. Okay. I should pause here and say something about the nature of writing and what it's been for me, which is that sometimes when I'm writing a story, I've planned it quite well, I think, but suddenly things will appear in the story, and they will refuse to leave the story. The stuffed raccoon is something like that. I did not intend for there to be a raccoon of any kind in this story, but here it is, and it will become very important as the story goes along. But right now, the reason for my fight with Robert is a stuffed raccoon. He won it from Victor, his best buddy, the result of a pool-playing bet, and installed it on our chest of drawers 2 weeks ago. Apparently, the raccoon is valuable. More important, Victor had shot and stuffed it himself, and he was terribly cut up at having to part with it. He offered to buy it back from Robert for $200. And you refused? I eyed the creature with disbelief. Its upper lip was lifted in a snarl, and one front leg was shorter than the other, although that could have been a result of Victor's taxidermy. It appeared ready to spring off the chest of drawers and launch itself upon us. Naturally, said the love of my life, you should have seen Victor's face. He ran his hand over the raccoon's back. Feel the fur. It's incredible. Soft and bristly at the same time. I declined. The only thing I found incredible was that he expected me to sleep in the same room with this monstrosity. Want a shower? Robert offered as a peace gift. I considered sulking, but I love showering with Robert, his fingers unbuttoning my clothes, letting them drop where they will, the way he holds me as he soaps my back, as though I were a child who might slip and fall. White space. But afterwards, I couldn't sleep. I became aware of a musky odor. The raccoon? Surely it couldn't smell. except of whatever embalmment Victor had used? Was it the scent of another woman? I couldn't stop myself from imagining Robert at work, his hands caressing female curves. What did he say to them? What made him the most popular massage therapist at Bodywork? In the morning, I wanted to confess my fears, exorcise them with laughter, but I couldn't. Instead, I asked Robert to move the raccoon to the living room. He refused. I claimed he was inconsiderate. He accused me of not caring about what was important to him. I took to covering the raccoon with a pillowcase when Robert was out of the house. He took to checking on it first thing when he returned. Without a word, he'd ball up the pillowcase and throw it with vicious accuracy into our dirty laundry basket. I'd rescue it surreptitiously so I could use it again. It was like a vaudeville show, except not funny. Thank you.
Next question. Yeah, we've got somebody.
Hi. Chitra, firstly, I think I love this. I love what you write. And I think the conversation so far has been absolutely phenomenal. I find all the women in your books to have like a very quiet strength. Not like Draupadi was, of course, much more assertive strength, but everybody has a quiet strength. But there's also a lot of yearning. And the yearning doesn't take away from the strength. So does this juxtaposition come from a deep personal space, or with you engaging with other women, staying away from home, or not fulfilling dreams? Or I really wonder every time I read your books.
Thank you. That's a great question. I think, of course, I have different kinds of women in my books, and some of them have more yearning than others. It depends on what their place is, where they're situated in life. But I always feel that when I'm writing stories, what a character desires is really central to the story. And the stronger the desire of the character and the stronger the opposition against it, the more powerful the story becomes. So I think I have chosen stories where women are in places where they want something very badly, but it's not easy for them to get. Or they want it and they get it, and then they discover that really they wanted something quite different. So I think, yes, yearning is a part of that. Although yearning can be in many registers, right? Some people yearn louder than others. But yes, that is important, because I think that's what creates the tension.
Good afternoon. All your books have female characters who make a very specific set of choices. So after the book is done with, do you ever find yourself sitting back and wondering, what if she hadn't done that? Or what if, say, in The Oleander Girl, what if Corby hadn't found her father? So do you ever find yourself wondering, what if she hadn't done that?
Yeah, that's a great question too, because not after the story is finished. After the story is finished, that's done. And once the story is done, I'm out of that fictional world and onto the next fictional world. But while I'm writing that story, I'm always thinking about the choices that people must make, which one seems like the right choice. I try to write from inside of the character so that the choice will come naturally. It will be something that character has to do because of situation and their own personality. So, character and destiny intersect and force the character into certain actions. But a lot of times, at a certain point in the story, it's as though the ball is rolling. It's propelled forward by these forces of character and destiny, and I just have to record it. Sometimes I will find characters doing things that really I wish they wouldn't do. I don't want them to do. Early in her life, Sabitri will make a big mistake. And, when she is about to make it, I'm like, oh, she's making this big mistake. I wish she wouldn't, but I see how she has to do it because of who she is. So that's the kind of thinking that I go through as characters are making choices.
Right. You've been waiting for a while. I mean, the lady at the back.
I just wanted to say men are also allowed to ask questions.
There are a few. We'll come to you, sir.
So we have a family here who've all...
If you don't mind
Hi.
standing up that way, I
So
can
we
see
have
you.
a family here who've all read Palace of Illusions, and all of us loved it. And it made my grandfather very happy because we were finally reading something with Mahabharata involved in it. So I was just wondering, you said you did research on the book. Did you actually find that any retelling with Karan as the love interest as you make it in the book? Or was that something that you imagined and put it in the book?
It's the story is about the attraction between Karna and Draupadi, and let me just tell you, if I had $1 for every time I was asked that question, I would be a lot richer.
Oh, I thought I was original. Oh, God.
No, thank you, thank you. It is an important question. There are hints. There are hints even back in Vyasa. There's definitely attraction from the side of Karna towards Draupadi. There's early in her story, when before Swayamvar, she is told that the Pandavas are dead. They've been killed in a fire. And so as far as she's concerned, Karna is the only great hero left now who was worthy of winning the Swayamvar, right? Managing to, perform the archery that's required. So in her mind, she's already thinking, he's going to come, he's going to win. And then things turn out otherwise. He does come, but he is prevented from competing in the archery. Okay. In the Bengali Kashiram Das version, there is more. And in fact, other great writers writing on the Mahabharata, including Rabindranath in his Karnakunti Shangbad, certainly hints at that as a major force. So I took some of that, and the rest is my imagining.
And what about Bhim, who comes in the end? I mean, who wins over, with his sheer devotion? Is
Yes.
that also something which is flowing
Yes,
from the
all through the Mahabharata, it is very clear. Bhim is extremely devoted to Draupadi. He's willing to do more for her than any of the Pandavas. That's definitely in the text. But I wanted to bring out his character. He's always seen as a strong man, but I wanted to bring out his tenderness in this book. So I've taken the same characters, I've just thrown slightly different angles of light on them. Yes. Questions?
I'm Arundhati Rai, and wonderful expositions from you, very fascinating chapters. But I was wondering, have you thought so far only lady members here have been asking you questions and not a single male member? I'd just like to understand your reading. Okay.
No, that is entirely my fault.
No,
There
it's
have
all right.
been people raising their
Okay.
hands.
Looking forward. Thank you.
Yes. But I might at this point just just say what sometime back people asked me, who do you write for? And my short answer to that was, I write for women and intelligent men.
Yes, sir.
The epics are all replete with boons and curses. Now, Draupadi is also given many boons. Some of those boons she considers to be a curse. How do you treat that?
Yes, that becomes a big part of the book. The very first thing that she gets 5 husbands, there's a whole story behind it, how in her previous life she had asked for a really great, wonderful husband, and she had prayed to Lord Shiva. But Lord Shiva, he was taking his own time appearing in front of Draupadi in her previous incarnation. So she kept asking him, she said, give me a really great hero husband. And she asked it 5 times. And then Lord came and said, sure. And then she got the 5 husbands. So there are explanations for all of her boons. But I see it because I'm telling her story, I see that she sees now it's not always that more of a good thing is necessarily better. When she has to manage all these 5 husbands, it's, sometimes a bit of a challenge.
So those of us who repeat ourselves endlessly should be very, very careful.
We should be careful. The universe might be listening.
So,
Ma'am, during the course...
A little closer.
Ma'am, during the course of your conversation, you stated that your book was based on Vyasa's Mahabharata and a Bengali version. Now, Vyasa's Mahabharata, Vyas is the writer of the Mahabharata, okay. But there are various commentators who write that. There are so many versions of that. So, because his would be perhaps in original Sanskrit, and that is not available for everyone. So, right. What is your source? Vyasa's Mahabharata, I know, is the original for everything.
Right. My main source was Kamala Subramaniam. She has a very good and very extensive translation of Vyasa. So I read that. I also read Raja Gopalachari's version of the Mahabharata, although that's very much his version. And he only focuses on what he considers important. So those 3 were my major sources. And I also read other people who had written novels on the Mahabharata. There are wonderful books available like Yagna Seni and Mrityunjaya from the points of view of these characters.
I know, I just wanted to say that, apropos of the question earlier from the back about Karna and Draupadi, the attraction between them, there's a very interesting verse play by Buddhadev Boshu called Pratham Partho. Pratham Partho is because Karna was also a Partho, Pritha's son, therefore Partho, and he was the first one, so Pratham Partho, where Draupadi actually approaches Karna, and this is just before the war, and she's actually worried about her husbands, but there is obviously an attraction between them.
Yes.
That's very obvious in the verse play, yes.
Yes, and there's that, the undertone is there definitely through the Mahabharata, of that attraction between these, 2 great figures of the time.
yes. Could we get the mic over there to the lady at the back?
Thank you. You're all asking great questions, and I'm so pleased that you've read so carefully. I really appreciate that.
Hello. My question is about before we visit the goddess, and I find that the choice of your names for the protagonists are very deliberate, Shabitri and Tara. So I was wondering how you would view the Indian tradition's view of the female divinity, and is there any relation between that and your protagonists?
Definitely, I chose the names of the characters, I thought carefully about the names. First of all, they're realistic, right? You would find Shabitri, Bela, Tara, Durga. Those are names that we see often, especially in Bengal. But all of them have, meanings attached to them, certain kinds of womanhood, which ironically, a lot of times these women will break through those. So Shabitri, who is, Shoti Shabitri, who brings back her husband from the dead. Well, this Shabitri's husband will die, but she will not be able to bring him back from the dead. So I was playing on the ironies of such names as well, but also pointing to the deep inner strength, the divinity that she then is able to draw on, or perhaps she is forced to draw on because of her tragedy and become strong as a result.
Chitra. Oh, sorry. Sure, please go ahead.
I just wanted to ask, you're talking about motherhood in this novel. Is motherhood all about choice or about sacrifice?
I think motherhood is a very complex thing. So it's about choice, it's about sacrifice, it's about the greatest joys we can experience and sometimes the greatest sorrows as well. So all of these women will experience these. And as we sometimes know in families where mothers and daughters both have strong personalities, there can be a lot of conflict. So it's a relationship where conflict and love can sometimes go on side by side and create something complicated. So as a result, in these women, sometimes when they have trouble, they don't turn to their mothers, even though they love their mothers. They have to find help somewhere else, because that is a very complicated relationship.
Oh, okay. A couple of questions more. while we're waiting, I did want to ask a question.
Yes, of
I
course.
wanted to ask you about your next project.
My
What are you
next
working on?
project, yes. My next project is going to be a novel based on the Ramayana, and it is going to be told from Sita's point of view. So, thank you, thank you. It is going to be, I've already started it. It is a very complicated and, challenging project, so please send it good energy. And I think, as with Draupadi, I want to explore the complexities of Sita's character, much of which is already in Valmiki but has been lost in popular translation over the years and in popular sayings about the character of Sita, the popular understanding about Sita being a compliant wife character. She is just so much more, so many more, so many more strengths and complexities in that character that I hope to explore in that novel.
Yes. So I'll veer away from Ramayana and Mahabharata. And one of the tragedies we are told of modern day life is that instead of men becoming more caring like women, we have the reverse social trend. We have women becoming more manly and not caring about consequences. Have you thought of putting on paper a story of a woman like that, who breaks free of tradition and doesn't care about how it affects others around her?
Yeah, I think in some ways, for a portion of their lives, all three of these women will go through a phase where they are like that, where they will break through tradition and suffer the consequences. Maybe Tara, their granddaughter, is the most clearly in that mode. But yes, I think that, that is something that happens. And it happens because of many complicated reasons, too many to go into. And yes, I think with each gain, there comes a sacrifice. And sometimes, women who've been at this end of the pendulum have to push through to the other end before they can come back to the middle. So I think we see a lot of that going on in this book.
So the middle path is the right path?
I would not, let me put it this way. I won't presume to say that,
but suggest
make that blanket statement, because for each woman, she has to find the right balance of the pendulum. For some, it is the middle path. For some, they need to break away and to create a whole identity. For some, they want and should be given the choice to live a traditional life. I think the most important thing is choice. If the woman is allowed to make her own choice as an adult, thinking individual, then whatever choice she makes is the right one for her.
Yeah. Could we have the mic in front, please? Yeah, thank you.
And then there's a hand.
Yes, and then there's a hand at the back.
It always fascinated me that both Sita and Draupadi are interesting, complex characters with many shades. But Sita is primarily revered as the compliant wife in large parts of India, and with people overlooking actually the more interesting parts. And Draupadi actually finds very few takers beyond the sort of urban intelligentsia. And she's a truly fascinating woman. For instance, I find her relationship with Krishna highly interesting.
Very, very.
Yeah. So
that's one of my favorite parts
yes,
as I wrote this book.
He's the friend, he's the sakha. So if you can throw a little bit of light on that, because you're planning to write on Sita, and you've written on Draupadi, why is this dichotomy, or she's just too much of a woman to take?
Well, I think she is a more controversial character, Draupadi. She is. She's doing what we were just talking about in just a moment back. She's making some very different choices. And, she too makes a choice to go into the forest with her husband. She's asked to stay home with Kunti, but she chooses to go there. She chooses to be the spark that'll keep igniting their need of revenge. So she is making very unusual choices. I think that's one of the things that perhaps people find problematic about her, although, there are many very different attitudes towards Draupadi. She is mentioned, there is a shloka people recite in the morning, And there are Pancha Kanyas who are mentioned. If you think of them in the morning, good things will happen to you. And Draupadi is one of them. So depending on where she's mentioned, different people have very different attitudes towards her. I think that's what drew me towards her. That was the challenge. Here's this very complicated person. How am I going to show her in this novel? With Sita, the challenge is different. How is this person who has been oversimplified through time to suit kind of a particular ideal of womanhood, how can I reclaim, as it were, her character and show her to be the strong woman who makes the choices that lead to, her life and some of her problems as well.
So I have the horrible, horrible job of being the timekeeper, and there's a lady at the back there who's had her hand up for a long time.
Yes, men are now asking questions, and I am very happy to see that. And there's Kulanda with the mic. Okay. Since you have the mic, why don't we do your question, and then we'll have the question.
I'll ask this very briefly. It's part comment, part observation. I don't know if it is a question. You are embarked on writing about Sita, and I think that you will be taking on quite a grave task. Best of luck, because Draupadi speaks her mind. We know she has a friend, Krishna, that she speaks her mind to. She speaks her mind to each of her husbands. She speaks her mind to Yudhishthir when she asks the question, did he lose himself first before losing me? So she's a vocal one, whereas Sita's silences are frequent and profound.
Right.
And I would love to read what you make of Sita. You must have already thought about how to go about it.
Yes, I mean, it is a work in progress. I'm discovering more as I write more. But, yes, Sita's silences are often pointed at, but she says a lot of things too. When Ram is leaving for the forest, she has quite a fight with him.
Yes.
She's like...
No, she says it twice. Another time when after Ram has just rescued her and says that I have no need of you, you can go with anybody you like, she says to him, you are speaking to me as a low-born man would speak to a low-born, to his woman. You're not speaking like a king. She censures him very strongly.
She does. And, she speaks at other moments also when she wants that golden deer. I mean, she wants it. She's like, Ram, I'm here in the forest with you, putting up with a lot of stuff. You better get me that deer. And when Lakshman says, I can't leave you, she speaks her mind to Lakshman. She says, you better go. You got some bad things in mind if you stay here with me and don't go rescue your brother. So, she has moments. And at the very end, when... she is asked to come back to Ram, and he says, so just do this one little pariksha in front of everyone and you can be reinstated. She's like, I've had enough of all of this. So she does speak her mind. It's just not pointed to. And I hope to bring out some of those things which are already in the original text of Valmiki. And someone's been waiting, I know, patiently back there.
Chitra, thank you for this brilliant conversation. I haven't read your book before we visit the goddess, but I'm very, very intrigued by the title. And it's almost as if the title itself is giving a message, and it seems like a veiled message, and it's like, get ready before you visit the goddess. And I really want to know how you came to choose this kind of a title.
Well, the title actually comes from a line, something one character says to another. So there's a very mundane meaning, which is before they go into the temple, they have to wash their hands and feet. So before we visit the goddess, we must cleanse ourselves. But of course, that has, a kind of metaphoric meaning as well. Before we visit the goddess, before we come in touch with our own divinity, or see that divinity in others, we have to prepare ourselves as well. We have to be ready. The divinity is already there, but we're not in touch because we are not ready, perhaps.
Last question. Anyone? Sir.
Well, let me hazard a question, though I don't belong to that category of men that you write for. But
I don't think so. I think you have already proved that you are of that category.
Well, you have been you have been talking about these characters from the epics and maybe very traditional prehistoric writings. Would you take up in one of your projects anything about the writers of those epics, say Vedavyasa, or someone of such stature? Would you ever consider that?
Yes, actually, you know, that's a great comment and question, because I have been thinking that maybe after I'm done with the Sita novel, I will write a novel about Kalidas, who has written these wonderful texts, many of which have very interesting, strong women characters, kind of unusual in his time. And he himself has a very interesting life story. So I think, you know, possible as a future project, a novel on Kalidas.
Thank you so much to all of you, the audience. Thank you, Chitra. It has been such a fascinating start to Republic Day. And I hope you all have a fantastic day ahead at Kalam. We hope to see you back here very, very soon and again and again.
I just wanted to say, add my thanks to yours. You've been such a wonderful audience. I know some of you might still have questions. Our conversation is ending right now, but it doesn't have to end, because I have people, a Facebook page and a Twitter account where you can write questions to me. I would be happy to answer them. Also today at 5:40 at Victoria Memorial, I'll be in conversation with Dia. Please come. We will talk about something quite different, so please come if you can.
Lovely. And Chitra, you will be signing books?
I will, and I believe there's something else before we sign books that's coming up.
Yeah, sure. So Mala, all yours.
Thank you, Josh. Reliable as ever. And it was a wonderful session. Thank you for the questions. They were unusually good. So thank you so much, Chitradi. And now I'd invite Dr. Shashi Tharoor to come and do a formal unveiling of Before We Visit the Goddess. Yes, not a complicated pack.
We get you. Well, just to say, I'm delighted to do this for Chitra. She's somebody I've known for a couple of decades now. I think just after she'd published her first book, Arranged Marriage, was when we met. And she and Murthy I've seen over the years, and their wonderfully named place in Sugarland, right? Which you call Gurgaon, I understand. Yes. There's so many Indians in Sugarland, they call it Gurgaon. And that's in Texas. And she's really been writing wonderful books that have delved in many ways into both contemporary Indian experience and, I think, animated them with an ancient spirit, as well as with an erudite but lightly worn erudition about Indian myths, histories, and legends. And I think altogether she has carved out a space that's quite distinctively hers, and which I believe deserves a wide readership. So delighted that she's here with all of you and that you've enjoyed getting hold of her book. And I'm very proud to, I should have done this at the beginning, but Calcutta traffic meant that one got here in time to do this at the end. And I'm sure that many of you will get your own copies and have them signed. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shashi, for that those very generous words.
So once Chitradi finishes signing this copy, her books are available at the back at the little stall we've put up for books. We'll be starting the next session in 5 minutes.